welcome into another episode of the Fourth and Gold podcast. It has been a while. Rob, you've traveled to, I'm going to say, over under 5.5 countries since we last potted together. What do you think it's been?
That's a hell of a line. I think we're sitting at 6.
Oh,
so,
okay.
And yeah, you got to leave the airport for that to count, by the way. So
no. Like a layover anywhere does not count in that listing.
Yeah, no. We leave the airport in our layovers. Thanks. Shout out American passports. They really help out in some of these transit countries.
Yeah. But so Rob's been all over the place. We did a quick free agency recap, I believe was our last podcast video. But at this point, we are now post NFL draft. That ended about a week ago at the time of this recording. It is Thursday. Actually, is it Thursday? No, it's Wednesday. Wow, I've lost track of days. Wow. I don't know.
You're not even the one traveling, dude.
I know. I don't know what's going on here. Either way, though, it is the Wednesday after the draft, and we just wanted to do a quick draft recap. So as much as I would like to banter with you, we did a little bit of that before we started recording. So let's get into it, and let's start with a few of your big draft takeaways. Rob, I don't know how you were able to watch the draft, but what were your overall high-level takeaways from the NFL draft?
Oh, it was a great Friday morning for me over a little bit of brunch, watching some of these picks roll off. But, I mean, rolling out the gate, how can we not start with these quarterbacks? 1, 2, 3 in the top 5 going, number 1, 2, and 3. You had 6 overall. I mean, I guess we have officially entered the era of the quarterback if we weren't in it already. It's pretty much if you can throw that ball downfield and play for a reputable D1 organization, you're going somewhere in the top round, it seems. So that to me stuck out the most. What about you?
No, I totally agree with that. I think one of the craziest things to me is like we've kind of seen the death of the mid-round quarterback. Like, think about it. We went 6 quarterbacks in the top 12 picks. And then the next quarterback off the board, QB7, was Spencer Rattler in the 5th round. It's kind of like, if you are worthy of like what used to be a 2nd, 3rd, maybe even 4th round pick, it's like, no, you've been elevated to a 1st rounder because every team just wants a starting quarterback. It's been the most valuable position in football forever, but it seems like teams are finally realizing that it is do or die. And with that kind of golden generation of quarterbacks, you're like Brady, both Mannings, Rodgers is getting older, et cetera, Drew Brees. Like, with all those guys retiring, I feel teams are starting to realize, oh, shit, there's really not that many great quarterbacks in the league. We need one.
Yeah, no, and I think you see also with the injury bug going around, like if you look at last year's starting quarterback lineups and then the ones that were playing like week 16, week 17, it was like, oh boy, not only do we need one, we need a couple quarterbacks in here. But I think the good point you make is that the haves and have-nots in the quarterbacks, right? There is no one going in these middle rounds, not even in the late first anymore. You're either a bona fide draft pick, aka going in the top 15, or you're a Brock Purdy end of the draft, let's grab a couple D2 D3 guys that were just putting up mad numbers and see if they might have that panache that makes them work in the big leagues.
yeah because it's like I mean, I'm not going to claim to be a college football expert, but I don't think there's that significant a drop-off between the 6th quarterback, Bo Nix, all the way to Spencer Rattler that's worthy of 12th overall to mid-late 5th round. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the case.
Honestly, at the rate these quarterbacks are going up and down and shifting across the leagues, we might see more action from a Riddler than a big Bo Nix anyways, right? So we'll see.
Well, but I don't know if we'll see more action because Bo Nix has only got to go against Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson. So low bar to start there in Denver.
Yeah, when I said you need more quarterbacks, I meant like good ones, not just stockpiling like actual players who registered in the draft as quarterback. Like, please put your position here when you sign up for Pop Warner. Actually, in this case, it was whoever Zach Wilson's mother that he's dating put him down on the list. But anyways,
the team mom who brings the orange slices.
Yeah, exactly. What other takeaways did you have besides quarterbacks becoming gold, literally?
I mean, beyond just quarterbacks becoming gold, just offense in general. Now, I think this was an offensive-heavy draft, but even if it is an offensive-heavy draft, the fact that a defensive player didn't even go until the 15th overall pick. That's insane in any draft. I think it just shows, I think it's partially how good offenses have gotten and defenses haven't been able to totally catch up to them. So people are like, we care more about offense. I don't know, but it was wild.
Yeah, and it's not even just skill position guys, right? Like it's just offensive players in general are going across the board, and the skill positions have shifted, except for our friends, the running backs, have also become accelerated the top two.
Offense minus running backs, defense and running backs.
Yeah, exactly. But no, that blew my mind that these defensive players are going so late. I don't know if it's just because there's only a few like individual players that can really change games, right? You have like your Aaron Jones, who now, sorry, Donald.
Not Aaron.
Donald, T.J. Watts, right? Even like your Sauce Gardners, these guys that like can change schemes. But there's only a couple of those really out there. Otherwise, it's very scheme heavy. You got players coming on and off all the time, depending on the coverages and the down and distance, right? So I think defense has become much more cog oriented, and that way you just kind of take these guys in the middle of the draft where the value is, and then make your schemes based on the personnel that you have.
I think I agree when it comes to the secondary and the linebackers with you that, like having a really good player in those positions is super valuable. But like, obviously teams can kind of say, we're just not going to go to like that part of the field. We're just not going to test that person. We're fine to go everywhere else. But if you have a good defensive end or like an Aaron Donald interior pass rusher, it's like they can make hell every single down,
right. Your Myles Garrett's, right?
Exactly. Like, Micah Parsons. It's like, let me be clear. Myles Garrett was absolutely worth a first overall pick. Like Micah Parsons, I would absolutely be very happy if I walked away with a first round pick, got Micah Parsons. I'd be like, even if there was a stud quarterback later, I'd be like, yeah, you got a stud quarterback later, but I'm still happy with my pick.
And to your point, who was the first defensive player drafted? A defensive edge rusher, right? Shout out UCLA Bruins. Latu was that pick going at number 15 overall. So it's pretty much like, unless you have a guy like that who's just an absolute menace that forces people to do double teams and draft players because that guy's in your division, aka the Steelers against Myles Garrett. Hell, even the Bengals who took an offensive tackle because we have to deal with that defender in our division, and also again quarterbacks are so special these days, so linemen are catching the coattails of that. But why don't we get it over to some individual picks in the first round? We'll keep it in the first round for now, and then we'll go a little bit wider from the draft. Drew, why don't you start with a couple teams that you thought nailed it?
Well, I'll talk more about the players' picks that I thought were nailed, because the first round is like, some teams didn't have picks, teams had picks, but
sure.
I really liked the Vikings getting Dallas Turner. Like, Dallas Turner, I thought was widely considered to be the top edge rusher, and you managed to get him at 17 overall. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the Colts who took Latu at 15. It's like, if he's the top edge rusher on your board, take him. I believe in that. But, like, the fact that you got widely considered the top edge rusher on the board at 17, it replaces Danielle Hunter, who left in free agency. That's an absolute win.
As your second pick.
As your second first round pick.
Second first round pick,
Yeah, like that's super good value. Beyond that, I have two other shit. The Lions taking Terrion Arnold. I really like that. I know I'm a Lions fan. No, but like I had Terrion Arnold as the top cornerback on the board, and that was the biggest position of need for the Lions. And this guy on basically every mock draft was going like easily inside the top 20. And you managed to trade up and get him at 24. Like, that's an absolute steal of a pick. And then the inverse of that trade to 24, the Cowboys, is my third one. Not primarily because of their pick of Guyton, but the fact that they turned their 24th overall pick into Tyler Guyton and BB or Beeb or however you pronounce it. Like,
BB. I think it's BB.
Yeah. Two offensive linemen, two starting caliber offensive linemen, which is how the Cowboys have always liked to identify themselves in the Jerry Jones era. I really liked that move for the Cowboys. So those are probably like the three I really liked in the first round that I was like, okay, you showed something.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you kind of nailed it. Those are all really good picks for their fits. I in particular like the Vikings on their second pick there. And I mean, I think you're a little bit on the homer end of the lines there. But you guys are just such an explosive team that kind of just fits in with what you're going for right now. It's like young, fast, punch you in the mouth, just get out there, put up points. So I'm not too mad at that either. And I've seen some of the experts agree. Mine are a little bit more, and I'm going to end with maybe the more controversial one. But I'll start with some of my more favorites. I love Brock going to the Raiders. That's just like a Raider move, right?
Yeah.
Take a big dirty, big white boy tight end. Like let's go.
This is like, I was thinking about it. I was like, it's a little bit of a weird pick because they did pick Michael Mayer in last year's draft, but like in terms of the value and the player and the style of football that is, as you say, Raider football. No, that's a great Raider football pick.
Exactly, and since we already said offenses are overblown, taking a tight end at 6 overall is not even like too crazy these days. So it just screams Vegas Raiders to me. Shout RIP Oakland and LA Raiders. Next up, gotta give it to the Chicago Bears. Honestly, Caleb, you take the best quarterback on the board, and then you follow that up with a real weapon in Rome Odunze out of the runner-up Washington Huskies over there. So I think they did a really good job at the top of the draft. Of course, they fleeced a couple teams to get there, but that's got to turn them around a little bit. I do think Xavier Worthy was a sneaky. Oh, before we get there, I wanted to shout out the Bucks taking Barton late in the draft. He's a great inside guy. I think the Bucks have like a good, solid team. Like this Baker thing is something to go for, and they're just like a rough and tumble scramble. So why not focus on the line, both protecting Baker there, but also giving them a leader across that offensive front. And so my two kind of more controversial picks, which I think we'll get into, are I do like the Xavier Worthy pick to Kansas City. As they show, they just need some playmakers on offense. He's fast. They need someone that hopefully has hands better than our boy Marquez Valdez-Scantling, although he did make some big plays in the last game of the season.
MVS in the playoffs showed up. MVS showed up in the playoffs.
Yeah. But there were some national primetime regular season games.
Regular season MVS. Yeah.
Bobbly. And so I know you'll have something to say on that. But then my last one, which I actually think was a good pick, and this is going to be very contrarian, Penix Jr. to the Falcons, I think is a sneaky good pick for them.
Okay, let me start with Xavier Worthy because I don't disagree as much there. I just don't love the pick because this is like a 4th round graded wide receiver. This is like not anyone special at wide receiver. The only reason this guy zoomed up draft boards was because he ran a 4.2 140, the fastest 40 time ever. And I get it. That's important. But that's fast. If you're the Chiefs, you already signed Hollywood Brown, who ran a 4.27 40. Like, is there really that big a difference? I don't think you need another one of those guys. But two, it's like, this is the problem with a guy like Kadarius Toney. This is a problem with some of the guys the Chiefs had this past year. Doesn't matter if they can get open. Guess what? Patty Mahomes can hit anyone if they're even slightly open. The problem is, can you catch a ball? And I'm not totally convinced that Xavier Worthy is going to be a great pass catcher, given all his kind of hype is based off of speed, not his ability to get open or catch the football.
Andy Reid will figure it out. He'll scheme him into some great little fucking plays. They'll get him some coaches and some nice gloves. I'm not too worried about it. They'll find a way in Kansas City.
But yeah, as for Michael Penix Jr., you're just wrong. Like, you're wrong. Like, how on earth is Michael Penix Jr. a good pick? I'm not knocking Michael Penix Jr. as a player. I'm not knocking him as worthy of a pick that high. The fact that we saw all 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12 tells you that, yeah, Michael Penix Jr. probably would have been gone pretty soon off the board after that. But the fact that he goes to a team in the Atlanta Falcons who just spent $180 million to bring in Kirk Cousins on a 4-year deal. And what do? You go and draft a quarterback that's going to be on a 4-year deal and who's going to be like 29 years old by the time Cousins' contract is done. You're not, like, you make that move for Cousins to win now. But the Penix Jr. move is the furthest thing from win now. It just doesn't make sense to me. I could go on for this forever, but I'll let you explain why you think it's good.
I think the bigger problem is the Kirk Cousins contract. I think this isn't actually good. So, as you said, quarterbacks right now are hot commodities. You had a really good one that took their team with like a very West Coast style run and gun offense all the way into the finals of the championship. Penix Jr. has been, besides the injuries, he's been a hell of a player so far. And speaking of injuries, Kirk Cousins, 35, coming off of an Achilles tear. And, you know, these quarterbacks, look at Peyton Manning his last couple of years, fell off real quick. Yep. Drew Brees, with the exception of like Tom, these things are not a guarantee. And we've seen that injuries matter a lot. So if you are trying to win now, you do need a backup quarterback that can step in for an old white guy at the end of his career, to be quite frank, who's recovering from an Achilles injury, which is going to be tough. I guarantee Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be the player he was before at his age coming back from the same injury, right? And so I just think that if you have Penix Jr., he can learn from Kirk Cousins, which is a hell of a thing to do. We saw a lot of that with like Rodgers and Favre, for instance. There's an opportunity there for a growth curve. You get to let him learn, to get healthy, to get the system. And if a year or two down the line, or even sooner, Kirky boy gets an injury or gets old, you have an option to carry what could be a good nucleus that you said is win now further into the playoffs. It's a weak division, let's not forget.
It's a very weak division, but here's the thing. No matter what, if you're the Falcons, you fucked up with this draft pick, because either A, you say no, it's a fine draft pick, you fucked up with the Kirk Cousins signing, to which I'd say, right. Yeah, but like, why are you wasting the rookie contract period of Michael Penix Jr. by paying $45 million a year to another quarterback when you could go and pay that to a player that could make the team better around Penix Jr.? Or on the flip side, if you say, no, we need to give that money to Kirk Cousins, then why wouldn't you go and use that draft capital to build around him? By signing Kirk Cousins, you're basically locking yourselves in. You're handcuffing yourself and saying, we are going to live and die by the success of Kirk Cousins until you make this pick. And now you're like, but we don't. It's like, you got to pick a direction. The worst thing you can do in professional sports is hedge. Because it's like one team wins. One of 32 teams walk away happy at the end of the year. You don't become the best of 32 teams by hedging. Yeah, could shit go wrong with Kirk Cousins? Absolutely. But that's the bed you made when you signed him.
Right, and that's what goes to my point, is that this is more about the Kirk Cousins contract than it is really. I think Penix Jr. at where he went was a good draft pick. I think he could be a really good, productive player in the NFL in a run and gun kind of style, like that rookie out of Houston Texans is doing right now. So that's where I'm saying, like, in terms of it's bad with the signing of Kirk Cousins at the price they signed him for as like an overall franchise decision. But I just think, looking at the draft and looking at who's available, picking a Penix Jr. there isn't the worst. There wasn't many after, right? As we've said. Yeah. So it was kind of the end of that tier of that caliber of quarterback. So that's all I'm saying there. And I guess it's a little contrarian. I just think a lot of people are bashing that pick. This might be a little Pac-12 favoritism as well. I just think that Penix Jr. could be a really, really good player. And so why not take that player in that position if you get completely tunnel vision away from how bad the signing of Kirk Cousins was and have no strategy whatsoever. Yeah. But just player for pick in the draft, that's where I'm saying it wasn't the best.
Yeah, but again, I can't remove that tunnel vision, because it's like,
right.
It's the same reason, like,
Of course. In terms of like NFL, franchise mode, Madden, this is dumb.
Unless the Falcons are going to try something brand new, you only get one quarterback on the field. And when you spend so much money and so much assets to get one, like, why are you having one of your highest priced assets not contributing to winning? So that's my view. Either way, let's move on. We're going to agree to disagree. I think most of the world's going to be on my side, but I'm sure you have some people in agreement. Let's go into so that's some of our kind of really good picks. How about let's go into our team winners and team losers
of the first round or overall?
Yeah, of the overall.
Okay. So, gotta start, biased maybe, but I think the Pittsburgh Steelers killed it as one of my winners. We just know how to draft. We know how to not get too excited, take our spots, and build around the team that we're trying to go for. Which, if you're not aware, is a team that never understood that the forward pass was invented. We are going to run the ball every single down, and I'm here for it. We got Najee, we got Jalen, we got Fields. Every now and then we might get Russell in there for a quick little ting. But I just love the idea that we take 2 linemen to start, then we pair it with a wonderfully great blocking wide receiver, a system guy in Roman Wilson out of Michigan, one of those tough-nosed players that we always do. We got some linebackers and defensive ends in there. It's just what we do great.
Yeah, no, I like the Steelers draft. They weren't my favorite draft, but I would call it a top 5 draft. I think I'd agree with that. Again, like 2 really good picks on the offensive line that can be plug and play basically day one. And one thing the Steelers do, and I will give the Steelers credit, the Steelers are shockingly good in the Mike Tomlin era at picking mid-round wide receivers. Like Antonio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Mike Wallace. Like the list goes on and on and on of just like productive mid-round wide receivers that the Steelers pick.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just another one that I feel like we're going to nail, right? A good system guy, knows how to win. Like, that's the kind of player. We pick, like, as you said, that, like, plug and play kind of deal. We just pick, like, NFL-ready players. And then they get into the Pittsburgh Steelers system and just become, like, cogs. So shout out the Steelers and the Rooney franchise for being able to draft since, like, the 70s very effectively. The other teams that I was like, I actually thought the non-Falcon Birds did pretty well as like a thematic category.
But like, how can you go and say the Michael Penix Jr. pick is good and then say the non-Falcon Birds? Like,
well, the rest of their draft was awful, and I never thought it was like the best overall pick. I just thought it had the largest delta.
I actually like the rest of the Falcons draft. I think the rest of their draft was fine. They really did address all their needs later in the draft. Just fucking biffed it with the first pick.
This was more of a delta on like the hate that the Penix Jr. pick was getting, and I was just trying to right size that. But the Falcons are still a god awful team, and they're going to be awful in that atrocious division. They just had to do a little bit of mediocre, but luckily, no one else besides the Bucs did good in that division, anyways, as we'll get to in our losers. But I like the Eagles draft. I know they're one of your favorites, so I'll let you dive into that. I thought the Cards did pretty solid. They got a good playmaker with Maserati Marv, and they also had a defensive tackle at the end of the first round. And then they just drafted solid throughout the rest, and they had a bunch of like 4th and 5th round picks that I think could be NFL caliber. Seahawks did something similar. I don't think they did so well at the beginning of their draft, but then they filled out really solid in the middle rounds there. And the Ravens did very similar to the Steelers. They just picked guys that they need. They're NFL ready. So shout out to the Birds. And then my last little fun caveat on winners was like the guys at home with their families again. I feel like that was way cooler than like anyone that was in the hot room in New York, and you're like waiting anxiously, and they're like panning in on you as you drop draft pick, and it's like that microscope doesn't seem fun. I love all the memes coming out of like the moms blocking the girlfriends from hugging, like big old Uncle Joe in the back going nuts, right? Like it reminds me of Favre back in the day and his jorts and stuff, right? So I just think that was that's winning these days. Be at home with your fam. Don't be in New York in your suit.
If I were to ever be like a draft pick, and I don't know, if I was like a presumptive number 1 draft pick, I don't know if the NFL would let me do this. Let me be extremely clear. But like, I'd be the type of guy who'd be like, I just want to be out fucking like, just out like, go bowling with friends or like go watch a movie. Like I don't want to
like the local pub.
Yeah. And it's like I'll have my phone on in case a team calls, so I can say, "Oh yeah, like hi, no, I'm happy to come to the team. Yeah, like I'll hop on a plane, whatever." But it's like I don't want cameras in my face like the entire time I'm just sitting in front of the TV watching this. Like that sounds fucking awful as like all my friends and family like stare, and it's like, is this gonna be the pick? Oh, you'd be really good on this team, and me being like, oh god, like I just want this to be over. Like I just want to fucking be distracted.
Like, you don't want to be Will Levis with the hot girlfriend not getting picked in the first round, and then all of a sudden it shoots back to you at home, and she's not even around anymore. Like, she just
No.
left you after you were the first round pick, right? There's nothing to gain from that side of thing. Besides, also a very strange way to get a job. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
right?
when you think about all the ways to get jobs in the world, being drafted to an NFL or any real like American sports franchise is a very, very bizarre experience. I
No,
gotta imagine.
because I'm an accountant by trade. I know, shocking.
For the mafia,
For
but
the
anyways.
mafia, yeah. But like, I can't even imagine just like I finished university. It's like, and you will be taking your accounting services to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Right. It's like you could just go to some. It's like you can go to some small town like Green Bay, but like a nice team, so it's okay.
Yeah.
You go to like the Carolina Panthers, small town shit team, or you end up in New York, and you're like, what? Like your whole world can change just
Yeah.
overnight like that.
And it's like you have no ability. It's like you're like, hey, like I don't really want it unless you're like Eli Manning with like that much kind of power and cachet.
Sure. But that's
It's
rare.
like
That's rare.
yeah, it's like unless you are literally that, it's like guess what? If you want to be like you really have no ability to choose where you go.
Publicly evaluated, you get graded. People like judge you on your performance and how you look physically, and like all
Like,
this shit.
Imagine
like,
having your performance review. Like, imagine the performance review you have with your boss, and all of a sudden you have like hundreds of thousands of people talking about your performance review. Like, oh, Rob did really poorly on his quarterly report this week.
Yeah. He's great at Excel, but man, those PowerPoints need some work.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what? That's insane.
Yeah, so anyways, yeah, so stay at home, be with your family, folks. Upcoming draft picks. Don't go to New York unless you're like literally the number one overall, and savor this moment because it's a bizarre experience. And my other question: what happens the next day? So they call you, and then like the next day, is it like my agent calls your agent? Do you get like a welcome package like when you get into college?
So typically the team flies you out to the location the next day. Like the team will basically get you on a flight the next day to come to their like facility to like tour
meet the head coach.
Again, like meet all the stuff, like basically integrate you into the system and get you ready for like rookie OTAs. So yeah.
So then it becomes somewhat normal at that point.
Okay, now this is fairly normal, but but like, can you just imagine that, like sitting at home and you're like, I'm gonna start my new job tomorrow, and I don't know what city it's going to be in.
Or how much I'm gonna make.
yeah. It's like I'm gonna either sign for like $8 million signing bonus or like $300,000, and I don't know where it's going to be.
So anyways, out of that chaos, who did you label as your winners?
My winners, I had 3 drafts that I really, really liked. The Colts was one, just getting a guy like Latu at the like 15th overall pick. Like, yeah, he wasn't my top edge rusher, but like a team that barely missed the playoffs is getting basically the 4th overall pick from last year's draft, who barely played last year, getting like the number 1 defender on their draft board in the draft. Like, that's an absolutely stellar pick. And beyond that, what do they go and do in the second round? They got Adonai Mitchell, who was widely considered to be a late first-round prospect wide receiver and was the number 1 wide receiver on the Texas Longhorns, where his number 2, Xavier Worthy, went above him in the draft.
That's all that combine, baby.
Yeah, that combine. But yeah, Colts, I hate to say it because I wish they didn't, but I thought the Eagles draft was pretty good. Like, they got their number 1 corner on the board, Quinion Mitchell, at 22. Great value there. They managed to trade up to take Cooper DeJean, who can probably be a safety initially and potentially move to a cornerback position once a guy like Darius Slay gets a little bit older. This is a massive position of need. They needed a bunch of secondary guys. They got them. So they had a good one. And then I'll give my final slot to the Saints. The Saints getting Kool-Aid McKinstry in the second round I thought was great. They got Fuaga, I think is his name, in the first round, offensive tackle. Really good pick there. And then, like, they got the 7th quarterback off the board in the 5th round when the 6th quarterback was taken with the 12th overall pick.
Yeah. Just value-wise, that's got that Brock Purdy element into it, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, this guy can't be that much worse than the guy before him.
No, that can't be
is an
that
insane
much.
gap.
Right.
The only gap that was longer was the Rams' lack of first-round picks the last 8 years. Whatever it was.
Yep. They got it, though. They did it. They picked in the first round. Yay, Rams!
Good job, Rams. Well, that's what you get for fucking being in LA. Anyways, so also shout out to the young Jeremiah Trotter Jr. going to the Eagles late, keeping it in the family. I like when franchises do that. But yeah, let's move over to our losers then. Mine were pretty straightforward. These franchises are not very good overall and also bad in this draft. I picked the Cleveland Browns and the Carolina Panthers. The Browns are already feeling the lack of picks due to their lovely Deshaun Watson trade. And so they did not have a first round overall pick. They didn't have a 4th. They just picked some middling guys all around. It's just very Cleveland of them. And Carolina, like, a wide receiver in the first round, you don't need a wide receiver. Like, they just are.
Yeah,
what
they
are
do.
they doing?
That's the biggest need.
Okay, yeah, but okay. Fine, but the rest of their draft also, like, I just don't understand what this franchise thinks they need to do to win.
No, like,
because they're not doing it in the draft, because they don't have like a cohesive strategy. They missed last year on the #1 overall pick, obviously, and so now it's like, what? You just take Xavier Leggett just because of his accent? It belonged. Like, I don't know. Didn't seem like a good fit for me.
I agree. I don't love Carolina Panthers draft, not because I think any of their picks were necessarily bad, but because it's like, you are the worst team in the NFL and you did not get significantly better in the draft. Now, that's because of what happened last year, but this is a team that is not got significantly better, is the worst team in the league, and may legitimately be even worse because they traded a guy like Brian Burns because they had to. And what? They've added Xavier Leggett and Robert Hunt, and you lost Brian Burns, and Adam Thielen's not getting any younger. So unless Bryce Young all of a sudden becomes a stud, or some of these later round guys become studs, like, God, this team might go 0-17. They might.
If they didn't lose that pick to Chicago, do they end up taking Caleb? Like, do you just take back-to-back first-round overall picks, quarterbacks?
Well, think about it. Like,
was that bad?
The Arizona Cardinals did that a few years back, where they picked Josh Rosen, and then the very next year with #1 overall, they took Kyler Murray. Like, absolutely, you can do it.
Yeah. You just got to identify them. My other big loser, though, is running backs. Sorry, fellas. No running back picked in the first round draft. The big names out of college all went 2nd, 3rd round. I think what it is, it's this plug and play. Like, you can just put running backs in now and they bust them. It's like fantasy for running backs. It's hard these days because your star players either don't have the share time or they get hurt, or they're drafting all these people like to come in and take some of the load off. And so it's just a tough time to be a running back.
I think there's just unless you are elite, and when I say elite, like, there are running backs that are worth first round grades, like Christian McCaffrey, absolutely in a redraft as a first rounder. Derrick Henry, same thing. I think the two guys who went in the first round last year, Gibbs and Bijan
is a good example.
Nobody's saying those guys weren't worth first round picks, but like, the vast majority of running backs in the NFL, I think it is plug and play. I think it's like, oh, like, this guy's down. Okay, we go with this other guy, and we didn't lose a step.
Look at the Ravens last year. You had Keaton Mitchell, he went down. You had Gus Edwards, he went down. They were just plugging in. I swear Rashard Mendenhall was about to come back for them. J.K. Dobbins, he was in going down. So yeah, it's just like, and they were still able to be very productive down to that skeleton crew. Not everyone's Baltimore, but yeah, it's just.
Yeah,
rest
like,
in
there
peace,
is
backs.
a very
rest
big...
in peace to your contracts.
Like, there's the guys who are up here, which is a very small list. But after that, everybody else is in this range. So yeah, if you can get up here, it's worth the first round picks. They can be very valuable. But if they're not up there, it's like, it's not much of a delta between that guy that's like a 2nd rounder or like a 7th rounder, really. So it's like, just take him when you're like, fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, and in terms of my losers, I mean, we already talked about the Falcons. I'm not going to go into that. But really, my only other main loser are defensive players, and more specifically, secondary players. Like, again, we all understood that this draft may not have been the strongest defensive player draft, but defenders dropped across the board compared to projected draft stock, and more specifically, corners dropped. Like, I think everybody had 5 corners minimum going in the first round. I think everybody had, like, okay, you got Terrion Arnold, Quinion Mitchell, Nate Wiggins, Cooper DeJean, Kool-Aid McKinstry. These are all first-round picks. And only 3 of them went in the first round, and all 3 well below their projected draft stock in the first round.
And there's some young cornerbacks that are making waves in the league that makes me think that, like, it should show you how good, if you get a Surtain II, if you get a Sauce Gardner, it's like, look, these are massive assets on your team. Why are they not being valued? Is it because they don't get sponsorship? Like, I don't know. Is this like a commercial problem? And it's just like, all right, we're just going to allow wide receivers and quarterbacks to run this league now and just adjust accordingly?
Just like, if I'm trying to stop a wide receiver quarterback, I'm going to target the 2 positions I'm going to go for is edge rusher and cornerback. And edge rushers have maintained their value. I think this was a weaker edge rush draft class. You still had a number of edge rushers go in the first round. Yeah,
especially the end of the first.
Yeah, Dallas Turner dropped a little bit, but there was like, I think most of them went around projected for the most part, with a little bit of a drop from Dallas Turner. But that's one guy who dropped a little bit, like nothing crazy. But beyond that, you have, like, the cornerbacks just dropped all across the board, and I'm like, yeah, edge rushers
and no safeties. Yeah, not even just cornerbacks, right? No safeties.
And so it's just like defensive players, and specifically secondary, just I don't know, like, do they just not have value anymore? Because this isn't like talking about, just this wasn't a good class for them. This was not a bad cornerback class. It's just nobody took cornerbacks in like that mid-first round when they would normally go.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It's a bizarre state of the league. We're really at a transition point of like this old guard to new guard. I feel like the NBA and NFL are doing very similar things right now.
It's the new team building philosophy. And I think a lot of sports, like as we get more and more analytics based and more about trying to win at the margins, teams are trying to be so much more like, oh, actually, this is like,
right. It's like baseball a decade ago, where it's like, no, we care more about on-base percentage than batting
baseball
average,
was like the kind of genesis of it, but football's like, oh man, passing is so efficient, and it doesn't matter what a defense does to us. We just take what the defense gives us.
Just keep going on 4th down and go for it too. The Lions are embracing this.
Yeah, 3-pointers and defend all 5
positions. Defends all 5 positions and stretch the floor, and that's
and even hockey's like, oh shit, if we have a defenseman who can basically be another forward, like all of a sudden we're fucking golden.
Yeah, it's like a power play.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's always a power play. So it's like, it's kind of just changed.
And then there's soccer.
The game. I think soccer was before every other sport. Because soccer, just like, again, it's about how many people have their eyes on this game. And there ain't a game that more people have had their eyes on than soccer.
Boo. Let's stick to the real football. But anyways, I think that brings us to the end of our draft pod. Any final words for the people, Drew?
Yeah, I just want to let everyone know that they need to go to Macy's to buy their jackets. $79.89, real nice deal.
Macy's. What you think?
For those of you who don't know, watch the Keon Coleman introductory press conference with the Buffalo Bills. It is spectacular. Chef's kiss.
We don't even say, actually, just stop. We're going to stop. We're all going to go watch this clip.